Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you're all having a good day. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at Sculk growth and how we can use that to set up a Sculk block farm, or for XP, for building blocks, for basically whatever you want to use them for. And for folks who might be familiar with this concept already, it may be because you've seen my recent episodes of Empires SMP, where I've been working on designs for farms like this, kind of freestyling it in survival just based on what I know, and I think I have a slightly better grasp on the mechanics now. So, despite the fact that we are using Sculk Catalysts as part of the wall design here, I am going to have to take a couple of these away, and we're going to put them to use in a nearby location. Because you may remember when we first came to the Deep Dark here, above our portal, above the ancient city, we discovered a zombie spawner down here in this room. And it is here that I think we're going to set up our first Sculk farm based on the spawns that we get from a zombie spawner, because the remainder of the Deep Dark biome around us is going to be free of mob spawns, but I did want this to be relatively close to the city project so that we could come back here and work on it when we wanted to. The other possibility is, of course, using the cave spider spawners that we'll find in this abandoned mineshaft up here, but as I mentioned in the previous episode where we were looking at powder snow farms and just idly exploring this, it doesn't seem like there are two cave spider spawners close enough to be activated together. They might be buried further in the mineshaft down there, but honestly, I think it's going to be better off to use one dedicated spawner for this. And at that point, the simple fact is that zombie spawners are much easier to control than cave spider spawners. If we've just got the one here, then it's even simpler, but honestly, cave spiders are a bit of a pain. They climb everywhere, they do spider things, you know the spider things. And so our first action, if we really want to use this spawner as the fuel for our Sculk farm, is to dig this entire area out. We're going to prepare the spawner as we normally would, digging out a 9x9 area around the spawner so it has the maximum possible area in which it can spawn mobs. And then once our 9x9 area around the spawner is all dug out, we're going to start digging downwards. And we're going to dig down quite a way because we want these zombies to die automatically. That is really the advantage of these Sculk farms, is that you don't actually need to be standing there killing the zombies yourself for them to spread to the Sculk, and the Sculk can be harvested later for experience. We're effectively making a delayed XP farm if we want to use it for that. Now, naturally, digging this entire thing out using our regular tools is going to be a bit of a pain, which is why I have brought some moss with me. We're going to spread the moss to all of the deep slate in here, and then it's going to be nice and easy to insta-mine with a diamond hoe. Or a netherite one, since that's what I've got. In fact, I think everything from an iron hoe on upwards is going to insta-mine moss. Just be careful of the durability. And wouldn't you know it, we found some diamonds on the way. But while we're doing this, I guess it's probably a good idea to talk about Sculk mechanics and which blocks the Sculk will spread to. So what better way to do that than to actually activate this spawner and fight a couple of the zombies it produces. This can teach us that any zombies that get killed in here will spread the Sculk when they are killed near the Sculk Catalyst. But you'll notice that the Sculk only spreads to blocks that moss can convert. So basically, any of the stone types and their variants that you'll find naturally generated in the world, and any dirt types and their variants can be converted as well. But it will leave blocks like gravel and sand, gravity-affected blocks especially, but also blocks that players have had a hand in crafting. All of those will be left alone by the Sculk growth. Maybe some Sculk vein will generate on them, but the Sculk blocks themselves will not end up replacing those blocks. It can, however, take over sections of the floor and wall in materials that are Sculk convertible. And if we press F3 right here, you'll notice in the long list of tags down the side, it will say Minecraft Sculk Replaceable. The Minecraft Wiki has a great list of all of these if you're not able to refer to them in-game using the debug screen, but it's best to keep an eye on what blocks you are using to both decorate and build your Sculk farm. For now, I think I'm going to stick to moss, because moss is honestly slightly easier to control, slightly faster, because we're relying on the speed of the mob spawner to produce zombies, and it doesn't leave these massive trails up the walls. So I'm going to dig this whole thing out until we're about 30 blocks down, and I'll meet you on the other side. So why, you might ask, are we 30 blocks down? Well, the main reason in this case is that that's where the bedrock is. Unfortunately, we can't go any lower than this because the spawner dungeon generated around Y30, and once I've dug about 30 blocks down, I start to encounter layers of bedrock. Now, I've dug out this line around each of the walls to kind of show that we can't really go any lower than this if we want to place any contraptions without straight up breaking a block of bedrock, which isn't possible with a pickaxe. You have to use glitches to do it, and we're not going to cover that in today's episode. But instead, yeah, I wanted to point out that we need to place a row of sticky pistons about where this level of the floor is, but bedrock is stopping us from doing that on all sides, which means we are going to have to build this contraption one block up from the bedrock layer. Before we go though, I am going to grab these diamonds because it's always kind of cool to find them down here. But with me, I have brought a bunch of materials that we're going to use to build a stone generator, which is going to supply this farm with a constant flow of blocks which can be converted into Sculk, since natural stone is one of those things that it's pretty easy for a player to generate, and it's also something that is easily converted into Sculk blocks. So along one side of our 9x9 area, I'm going to remove a section of the wall here so that we can place a bunch of sticky pistons. They're going to face upwards along this wall, and their job is to pull the stone down from the area where it generates one block above this. Shortly after they do that, a row of regular pistons is going to push those stone blocks outwards into the room, making sure that a flat floor of stone is constantly being generated underneath this farm. And once the zombies rain down from the spawner above and die from fall damage on that stone floor, the Sculk Catalysts are going to convert it into Sculk, and the stone floor is going to keep generating more. This means we all need a little bit more room to work with around the back here, and in fact we're probably going to have to eliminate a lot of the other Sculk convertible blocks around here in order to make this happen, because of course the Sculk can travel, and when it spreads, it's going to spread downwards and up the walls as well, as we saw in that example earlier. So one of the things we want to avoid is having any Sculk convertible blocks in the area of the farm, so it's only going to target the stone blocks that we generate here for conversion. Another way we can potentially get around that is by converting a bunch of the deep slate that we've been gathering into slabs or stairs, since Sculk blocks and indeed Sculk vein will not be able to generate on or replace either of those blocks. So now most, if not all, of the deep slate blocks have been weeded out of this patch of bedrock. We're going to cover the floor underneath here in slabs, just to be on the safe side. And just to prove that, through the debug info on the right hand side there, you'll see that the only tags this block has is Minecraft slabs and mineable by a pickaxe. So no Sculk conversion, no moss conversion. These slabs are going to be safe from any of that. Now to set up our stone generator here, we need to work on the piston timing portion of things. The stone is actually going to be generated one block above these pistons. So the stone is actually going to be generated right here. The sticky pistons will fire, pulling these blocks down into this space, and then after that, the regular pistons will fire, pushing the stone blocks out into the room. This naturally means we have to have the sticky pistons fire first, which means this row of pistons here needs to be on a delay. And in another circuit built in another place, I would probably want to open up this area underneath these pistons and have some target blocks that we could power with a single line of redstone running alongside them here. Unfortunately, that's not going to be possible here since we have a bunch of bedrock down this low, which means we're going to have to power the pistons directly from the side, since any solid blocks that we place in this position here are going to find themselves activating both pistons. So I'm going to grab a handful of repeaters and probably, from the looks of things, craft a few more. And we're going to insert a bunch of those into the sides of these pistons, not add any delay on those, just make sure that all of these pistons are going to be powered by a single line of redstone dust here, so that when we activate the farm, this row of pistons fires first. It's going to be nice and easy to fire the second row of pistons on a delay. We just need a repeater with a longer delay than these repeaters, feeding into a line of redstone dust along these blocks here. But once again, we need to make sure that these blocks are not blocks that can be converted into Sculk blocks, just so the Sculk doesn't think it can travel that way. They're not at risk of being destroyed, it's not going to displace the redstone, it's just a matter of making sure that the Sculk doesn't have an escape route through these blocks here. So we're going to have a repeater up here, we're going to set that to 3 ticks. That should be enough. If we activate both of these 2 redstone lines at once, say for example if we put something feeding a redstone signal into this block here, then that should hopefully activate this row of pistons and then that row of pistons. This needs to be a very short pulse from something like an observer, because if it's a longer pulse, the sticky pistons are going to stay extended and the second row of pistons isn't going to have a chance to fire. So we couldn't use a button or a longer piece of redstone timing, it's going to have to be a short pulse. But now if I place some redstone dust in front of this observer, you'll notice that the sticky pistons there fire, and then the other pistons fire shortly afterwards, like so. It's going to drag the stone blocks down and push them out into the room. And as long as we've got the room to do it, which I think we should do here if we build the sideways version, we're going to time all of this out using an etho hopper clock. So if I now put a handful of items in here, let's use 32 deep slate for example. Yep, that's fired that once because the observer's detected the update from the sticky piston, and it should do the same once these 2 pistons shuffle the redstone block over to one side. Yep, perfect. That's worked out splendidly well. So once again, this is the Etho hopper clock. It's 2 hoppers with a set amount of items moving between them. The redstone block locks one hopper, allowing the other hopper to push the items into it. These comparators are reading the hopper's output into solid blocks either side, which transfer the signal via this redstone dust to the pistons. And this observer here detects one of the moving components of the mechanism, which allows it to fire a single pulse of redstone signal through this system. Now, successful though this stage has been, I realized that our next task is to get the lava and water moved in. And the water is going to be provided by a set of water sources along this edge, which means we probably need to set it back 1 block further from the wall. So I'm just going to move this whole mechanism back 1 block. And having done that, we're going to place a row of blocks in front of this whole setup just so the water doesn't leak out anywhere else. Then we'll build a couple of blocks up the sides here, like so. In fact, it would make a lot more sense if the blocks up the side were not converted into Sculks, so let's make sure we do that. And along either this front row of blocks here or this back row of pistons, we're going to be placing a series of stairs. It doesn't really matter which way you do it, as long as they don't have the opportunity to leak water out of the sides, because we are going to be waterlogging this set of stairs. But if you're putting the row of stairs along the back of the pistons like this, you'll probably also want to have a row of stairs along the front wall here, just to make sure that the lava stays contained, but also to make sure that Sculk Vein and Sculk blocks don't take over this front wall. We're going to briefly pause our hopper clock using a lever so that we can create some water sources inside of here, and we're going to fill every stair along the side of here with a water source, making sure that we eliminate all of the water sources from the bottom here and everything is just flowing into this trench. On top of that trench, we're going to put the lava. And we are once again going to use a row of stairs to make sure that the lava cannot escape and that the blocks here cannot be converted into Sculk or have Sculk Vein growing on them. Then we're going to place the lava next to these stairs so that it flows out over the top of the water and converts it all into natural stone. We're going to put another one 3 blocks in from this side as well. They should flow together in the middle, but they should also flow out to either side. That entire row of blocks there is now converted into stone. And then if we re-enable our hopper clock, we should find that a row of natural stone is pushed out from behind here, and it'll keep producing natural stone this way every time the hopper clock activates. Now that's one of the major parts of this contraption done, and converting these blocks into Sculk is going to be relatively simple. All we need to do is place a couple of Sculk Catalysts nearby, stand near the zombie spawner so it activates, and watch them all rain down, take full damage and die, spreading the Sculk blocks to the stone. And the placement of the Sculk Catalyst is really up to you. On the Empires SMP, I placed mine in the center of this square of stone, but you might also want to put them out towards the edges. I think in a 9x9 area though, putting it directly in the center, directly below the mob spawner, while some mobs might take damage and die on the Sculk Catalyst block itself, you'll find that any mobs that die in this 9x9 area should trigger the Catalyst to produce more Sculk blocks. The only other minor concern we might have is collecting the drops from a farm like this in case you want to store all of the rotten flesh you get from the zombies, but you're not going to get anything more interesting than rotten flesh out of this farm, so I think it makes the most sense to just ignore the drops entirely, let the rotten flesh despawn, and focus on the Sculk blocks as the product. If you do want to keep the drops though, replacing the slabs in this floor with a simple minecart track with a hopper minecart running underneath it, and then a place to unload the hopper minecart's contents should be a nice straightforward thing to do. We've done something similar in the Froglight farm recently. But now honestly, our most important concern is having somewhere for the Sculk blocks to go, because right now the floor of this room is just going to fill up, and in order to harvest the Sculk blocks we need to come down here and completely remove the floor. So that's not really something we want to do. In fact, the ideal scenario is that the Sculk blocks are fed up towards the player where they are standing near the mob spawner so that the farm can constantly be running. The solution is to set up another row of pistons that are going to push the Sculk blocks up this wall, effectively turning this into a kind of printer. This is just going to be a row of 9 normal pistons lined up with the stone as it's ejected from the machine here and turned into Sculk. We're going to have a wall here which is going to change shape when a block comes into contact with it on this side. That change is going to be detected by an observer, and an observer is going to fire all of these pistons, similar to how we recently did the piston feed tape in our mud farm. So that should do the job. A wall here, an observer detecting it, and a line of redstone dust running alongside blocks adjacent to these pistons. When the stone reaches this point here, it's going to be pushed upwards by the pistons automatically, freeing this machine up to produce more. Except, of course, hopefully, it's not going to be stone by that point, it's going to be Sculk blocks. Now, these pistons are naturally going to have to obey the 12 block piston push limit, so once they get 12 blocks up here, we're going to set up another mechanism similar to the one we're using to pull blocks into our stone generator here. Except instead of pulling the blocks down and then pushing them out, it's going to pull the blocks back and then push them up. But the mechanism should be largely the same. Yep, there we go, perfect. It's working as intended. And once this is all Sculk blocks, that's going to form a wall of Sculk traveling up towards the player. I'm actually going to ride this wall up right now so that we can make sure that we've cleared out enough blocks above this that once it reaches the push limit, we can set up our next mechanism. And there we go, 12 blocks up the wall. That's where we need to put the mechanism that's going to pull the blocks back and then continue pushing them upwards. Before we do any of that though, I'm going to take away all of the torches that might be preventing this mob spawner from spawning any mobs. I've got a couple of them placed on the walls around here. That one down there is probably fine, just so we can see what's happening further down. We're going to remove the torch from this wall and then break the one on the mob spawner, which should start spawning zombies more or less immediately. There we go, we got 3 zombies right there, and they don't take enough fall damage. Okay, we're going to have to do something about that. Yeah, I was worried this was going to happen because we're starting with a spawner that's relatively far down. And once again, killing mobs in the radius of the Sculk Catalyst, but outside the radius of our stone platform, has led to some of the Sculk blocks spreading. So if this fall is not enough to kill regular zombies, and it's definitely not going to take care of the armored variants of zombies that we'll find spawning here occasionally, we need to install some sort of trap that's going to mean the zombies take additional damage once they are down there. And if we want to use some of the resources around us to do that, then I think we might have a decent shot at using powdered snow. If we end up placing a full layer of powdered snow at head height for these zombies, then while it's going to cushion their fall, so the fall damage is going to be more or less irrelevant, it will eventually kill them. And crucially, there is an air block between the powdered snow and the floor. When I initially tested this in my creative flat world, I figured why not use lava 1 block above the surface here, and that could be held up by signs or fence gates or something like that. But unfortunately, having things like fence gates and signs on top of these blocks meant that they wouldn't convert into Sculk blocks in the first place, and putting lava all over the floor also doesn't allow these blocks to convert into Sculk. So while powdered snow is going to be a lot slower of a kill, this spawner is not going to be producing zombies exceptionally fast anyway, so I have a feeling that might be our best option. And even though our powder snow farm has not produced a great deal since I used the last batch for the Froglight farm, there is thankfully a bunch of powdered snow on a nearby slope of this mountain. This right here is a drift of powdered snow, in fact, so I'm probably going to dig myself out of this by bucketing up a couple of blocks of it and using those in the farm. So having put it all in buckets, and oh boy, it takes a lot of shulker boxes to transport this much powdered snow, I'm going through placing it all in the 9x9 footprint of this farm, pick blocking as I go so I don't have to open my inventory every couple of seconds. And even then, I didn't quite have enough to fill out this entire platform, so we need a lot of powdered snow, but hopefully this is going to be worth it. Of course, if you're looking for a solution that doesn't involve powdered snow, you could probably have the zombies fall into a trail of water, as we typically do with them, have them shoot up a bubble column, and then come down at a point where they're going to take more fall damage somewhere over the top of this. The Sculk Catalyst doesn't even need to necessarily be underneath the zombie spawner itself. But I think one of the benefits of designing the farm like this is the random distribution we get from zombie spawners. So when I break this torch, zombies are going to fall in a variety of different positions. And yeah, that's the other thing. This one doesn't really account for baby zombies, does it? In the meantime, more zombies have spawned, and this just kind of looks like a weird set of wriggling plants, I guess, right now. But if we light up this spawner, wait for the remainder of the zombies to die, and then go down and look at what's happened to the stone underneath, give or take the fact that the baby zombie was still down here, you'll see that a decent amount of this has now converted into Sculk blocks. We'll get our last piece of the piston feed tape set up over here, and from that point, we should have a decent supply of Sculk blocks coming up to the area where a player would stand. The only other thing that remains is the timing of this, and we need to make sure that we have enough items in this hopper that it's going to push out some fresh stone occasionally, but not constantly, because otherwise we'll end up with a lot of stone coming through this farm and not a whole lot of Sculk. Either way, we just need to get that piston feed tape fixed up down here, and we should have a decent supply of Sculk blocks coming through. Alright, our second part of our piston feed tape is in place. We'll probably need a third, actually, because I think the ideal setup for a farm like this is not necessarily that the player stands here and harvests all of the blocks as they arrive. I think the best thing to do would be to set up a kind of network of piston feed tapes, feeding them all into giant cubes of material, which should be pretty straightforward to do. You just set things up the same way we have them here, with an observer detecting a wall, target blocks underneath, and we have the luxury of using target blocks at this time, and that can shift their direction between left to right and up and down, which is really useful when you want to compact things into a large enough area, and I think we'll probably cover that in a part 2 of this farm. In the meantime, though, the last thing I need to do is set up the timer down here once we get past the powdered snow, and as you can see, this thing is already occasionally producing the occasional Sculk sensor, but once again, that's not going to be a huge issue when we're just focused on getting the Sculk blocks out of this farm. The main thing we need to be concerned about here is the amount of items that go into our hopper clock, because that spawner is going to produce a cluster of zombies anywhere between about 10 and 40 seconds between cycles. So every 10 to 40 seconds, probably averaging out to about 30 seconds, you're going to find a group of zombies dropping from here. And it could be one zombie, it could be up to 4 zombies. So potentially we're looking at converting either 5 Sculk blocks or 20 Sculk blocks out of this pad of stone we're generating, because each Sculk block basically equates to 1 XP that the mob would drop, 1 single point of XP. And since zombies drop 5 XP, they're going to produce 5 Sculk blocks each time. So effectively, I think on average we want to generate a row of stone here about every 60 seconds, and that should guarantee that every time a row of stone is generated here, it gets converted into Sculk blocks. The push speed of hoppers, the speed that dictates how fast items leave hoppers, is roughly 1 item every 0.4 seconds, or 2.5 items per second. So if we want to break this down, 150 items, that is 2 stacks and another stack with 22 in it, is going to be the amount that will cause this clock to change state every 60 seconds. And I think that is going to be ideal for what we want to do here. We're also going to wire up a control lever to switch off either one end or the other of this hopper clock. Basically, all it needs to do is power this redstone dust permanently, so we'll have a lever up there somewhere, and that's going to allow us to turn the clock on and off, because whenever we light up the spawner, that's going to stop producing zombies, but it's not going to do anything to this stone generator down here. That's going to keep producing stone. So we want to make sure we can switch that on and off from some sort of control room. And up here gathering stone, just so I can craft together a couple more repeaters, I have made a discovery. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our first block of deep slate emerald ore. I literally just looked over to kill a creeper because I heard some footsteps and the creeper was standing over here, and there's some deep slate emerald ore right here. Oh my goodness, is it just the one block? It looks like it is. I have to make sure that I'm using Silk Touch for this. Yeah, we got our first deep slate emerald ore. This block is probably the rarest ore block in the game. Only generates in the deep slate layers underneath mountains, where emerald generation is typically going to dwindle to about nothing anyway. So happy that I spotted that. Incredible. Anyway, back to the farm. This isn't necessarily the smartest way of doing it, but I've run the redstone wire up behind the wall here so that it comes out around this spot. And we're also going to put a bridge over to this spawner, which is going to transfer the redstone power to a redstone lamp. So every time we switch the light off, we're also going to switch the stone generator on. Follow our trail of redstone dust all the way down here and collect this lever from the machine. That's going to start the stone generating again. And now a lever attached to this block will both switch on that redstone lamp to disable the spawner, and will also disable the stone generator. Now we can take the torch off of that and activate the farm using one lever. I think we'll want to get some tinted glass or something in here just so that we can block off any other light getting to the farm, and so that we can see what's going on in here without disturbing the mechanism. But one other thing to note is that unfortunately our powder snow compromise isn't going to work out 100% of the time, because there is the chance that a zombie will occasionally spawn wearing leather armor, which is going to protect it from the effects of powder snow freezing in much the same way that wearing leather armor on a player does. So once again, the ideal scenario for this farm is that we build it high up enough that the fall damage from landing on the platform is going to kill the zombies instantly, instead of the powdered snow setup that we've got here. This is just unfortunately what we had to do, considering the spawner was too low down for them to take any impact on fall damage. And stuff like dripstone or wither roses that might be able to damage them more passively as they fall or once they're on the platform isn't going to stay planted on the platform, considering that it's constantly moving, producing stone underneath there. Speaking of which, it looks like our stone has started to creep up here, and that's the last little bits of stone that weren't converted into Sculk during this process. If we take a quick look at the wall down there, you can see that a pretty steady line of Sculk is now creeping up from the bottom of that, and some of that is even getting converted while the zombies are dying here in the farm. But in the meantime, it seems like the farm is doing its work, give or take the occasional baby zombie, which I might have to find another way of dealing with. But for now, I think we'll just do a quick fast forward until we're ready to make our first harvest of Sculk blocks. Well, here we are at last, facing a wall of Sculk blocks, and we can harvest a bunch of these and they'll keep getting made by the system. There is one block of stone seems to have come out of this thing, and that is all. So that was probably the last remnant of the blocks that weren't able to be converted. So we can use our Silk Touch hoe to gather these for the blocks themselves. We can use a Fortune hoe, or just, a regular kind of hoe to get the XP out of them. Fortune won't give you any more XP orbs, sadly. But I do think this farm is in need of improvement. While it works kind of for now, and it's really interesting to hear the equip sound changes, where the zombies actually make that equipping noise when they first spawn in wearing armor. I do think we could do this farm better. I think this whole setup is going to work wonders for anybody who has a spawner that's high up enough that they can kill the zombies by full damage. But this compromise with the powder snow, the more I think about it, the less I like it, really. It doesn't deal with the leather armored zombies or the baby zombies particularly well, or at all, quite frankly, and that's kind of a problem when you consider that eventually those are just going to be taking up the mob cap down there unless the player is standing far enough away that they can despawn. With the lights out though, I think this farm is actually producing 3 or 4 zombies each time, which means potentially that the zombies per minute, or the ZPM, I guess, is a little higher than I was expecting. And so I think it may actually be worth decreasing the amount of items in that hopper clock, because it's taken a little while for these zombies to die, but in that time the farm has not really produced that many extra stone blocks, and so as you can see from it creeping up the walls around here, the Sculk is having to find other places to go. It's also producing a heck of a lot of Sculk sensors, which we can actually gather from this farm if we really wanted to, but as you can see, it's actually turning the blocks in here into Sculk before they even get pushed out from underneath this row of stairs. And so that's leading me to question whether or not it's possible to convert Sculk blocks with something else on top of them, which is an interesting prospect, but I think we honestly need to do this whole farm a little differently. It'd work super well if we didn't have to make the compromise of the powdered snow. So instead, what I'm thinking we might end up doing is building something like this, building a fall trap for the zombies, but building it in the next chunk over, and instead of having this issue where the zombies can't take enough full damage, have them fall into a water stream, direct them up a bubble column, and then down into a drop where they can die of full damage, making sure that they convert the Sculk blocks instantly. I think that would lead to the farm running a little faster. I'm still happy to put out this video because it's obviously been a pretty detailed walkthrough of creating one of these farms as a full trap, but we need to work on the full trap part of that for just this specific set of circumstances where the spawner is not high up enough. One other thing to bear in mind is that if you see a zombie down there in the farm and it's not dying because it's got some sort of leather armor or whatever on, be careful what you're shooting at it with, because if you end up shooting powdered snow with a flame bow, the arrow is actually going to burn away some of the powder snow blocks, and if the mob gets set on fire, the mob is A, going to be put out by the powdered snow, but any of the blocks it touches in the process of that are also going to be erased. And it's a good thing that we can farm the stuff because that just destroys the block outright. Now, I'm not worried about those blocks right now because we're going to redesign this farm in the next episode, but for now, I think that's probably where we're going to leave it for this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. Folks, I hope you've enjoyed a little look at the trial and error process of setting up one of these Sculk farms, and hopefully this is information that you'll find useful in setups where you have a spawner that you can just kill the mobs using full damage. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll be trying to explore this in a slightly more intelligent way. And in the meantime, thank you so much for watching this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. My name has been Pixlriffs. Don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you folks soon. Take care, bye for now.